Hey, Ellie, do you remember learning about the food guide or the food pyramid when you were in elementary school?
Absolutely. I remember the posters on the wall, and just that visual has been in my mind always when I think about the food guide pyramid or think about food and what we should and shouldn't be eating. I go back to that picture of that pyramid. What about you?
Yes, I remember that food pyramid very much from my elementary school days. And then when I was a school teacher, teaching the food pyramid as well. And today, what we want to talk about is we want to talk about the new food guidelines and policy. And luckily for us, Allie is especially qualified because she does have a master's in public administration. So she lends some deeper understanding in terms of policy making. So let's dive in.
Yes, let's dive in. And we're going to talk about it from the nutrition side. We want our Girls Talk Healthy Aging listeners to know how this applies to you and maybe how it doesn't apply to you. And so, yeah, we'll talk about some policy, not just about, we'll start about just talking about, I'm sure most of you have heard the news that we do have a new pyramid. And most people probably even know that the new pyramid is an inverted version of the old pyramid. And the reason most of us know this, and this goes to the public policy side of things. One, most of us remember the original food pyramid, and one of the reasons I think that we remember that is one, we were of the age, at least Sean and I, we were of the age that we were in school learning when that came out. And so that was the thing that we were taught earlier on. And then it's like you said, as a school teacher, and most people that are probably paying attention to this type news are in our age ranges or older. Like I'm thinking my niece is probably not really, and who's in college, is probably not really paying as much attention to this. So we remember the food guide pyramid, the original, most of us that are listening. A lot of us probably are not aware that we had the original food guide pyramid, and then we had an updated version where they added activity to the food guide pyramid. And you may have taught that part when you were teaching, Shauna. I don't know.
Yeah, it is different in Canada. There are some
Yep.
similarities, but then it also went to the MyPlate. And
Yep.
I think the statistics are such that not that many people actually even knew that the pyramid was changed to the MyPlate.
Yeah, so I do want to give a brief history and talk about my plate a little bit because we had the food guide pyramid, the updated food guide pyramid, and before that we had wheels and other iterations of some kind of food guidance. And the my plate was most people don't know that it was changed in 2011 to an actual plate, and I'll have some visuals. If you're listening, you can listen in, but also if you want to check this episode out on YouTube, this would be a good one to watch on YouTube if you can, because we're going to do some screen sharing so that we can show you just so we all are more knowledgeable because food is something, hey, we eat it every day, so it's important to all of us. And so I'm going to go ahead and pull up the different pictures on and start sharing my screen so that we can look at those things and see what the differences are. So it's going to take a second for the computer to let me make my screen bigger. All right, so this image I've got up now is a good one just to show you some different iterations, and I'm gonna kind of scroll back of the USDA food guidelines and just how we had like wheels, and then we had charts, and then we had like food categories and food groups. And then in 1992, the one that we're most familiar with is the food guide pyramid. And this particular picture doesn't show as well as far as the different servings, but you can see the general things if you're with us on YouTube. And if not, I'll kind of just spell it out. You've got grains at the bottom, bread, cereals, rice, pasta group, and it says 6 to 11 servings. And that's a whole nother conversation about what a serving is, but we'll save that for later. And then we've got our vegetables as kind of the next biggest thing, and then fruit. And then above that, we've got our meat and poultry and our milk, cheeses, and yogurts. And then at the very top are our fats, oils, and sweets, and using those sparingly. So that's the one that most of us grew up learning. And then the next picture is the updated food guide pyramid, and that was in 2005. And this is when they added the staircase on the side of the pyramid, and they they used a color coding system where they had the grains as a certain color and the fruits as a certain color and the vegetables as a certain color to give you a visual. And the yellow, if you're watching, if you're looking at this, you can see there's a little sliver of yellow. So that would be like that fats category. That would be the smallest category. And they indicated and really put more emphasis on activity when this guideline was released. And something important to know is Americans, the dietary guidelines for Americans something that is updated every 5 years, or that's been the history for a good while. So every 5 years, these things are updated. Now, that doesn't mean the pyramid was updated every 5 years because it was around longer, but they did change the pyramid, update the pyramid a little later, and put more focus on activity in the early 2000s. Then in 2011, what most of us and most of our listeners probably do not realize is that we had something introduced called the MyPlate, and it took the place of the pyramid. So if you're looking online with us, I've got a picture here of the MyPlate, and there's two different versions of 2011 and 2020, but it really did not change. You can tell the picture did not change. The background colors a little bit, but the picture is pretty much exactly the same from the 2011 version and the 2020. Now, I want to take a minute to say, like, why do most of us not know about this version? I think there's probably there's probably several reasons, but I'm going to give you kind of Allie's ideas on that. One, I think that it seems to me that there was a good marketing done on the original pyramid, maybe more so than MyPlate. But then my question is that because I was actually in school at the time when the My Pyramid came out, so I was familiarized with that versus I was older and out of school when My Plate came out, so I was not on the educational receiving end of that as far as being in school and learning about it. So that would be a question for maybe some of our nieces, nephews, grandkids, kids out there. You might ask them, are they familiar with My Plate or the Food Guide Pyramid? I think that would be interesting to see. What I have found asking my clients and my ladies that I train, they know about the pyramid. They don't know anything. They don't even know that My Plate existed, which I find very interesting. And so, Shawna, do you want to speak to any of that so
I
far?
I would agree. And when I speak with my clients, maybe it's the age. And when we were on the receiving end, or for myself as a teacher, the delivering end, I was teaching at a time where the pyramid was the thing, and the My Plate is unfamiliar to most of. I'm vaguely familiar with it. I've seen it, but it's not
Mhm.
something that is ingrained in my brain like the pyramid was.
Right.
My plate, not so much. So I would
Yeah.
have to agree with you on that as well, Allie.
Yeah. So don't feel bad if you're like, My Plate, what is that? But we did because our purpose and our goal here at Girls Talk Healthy Aging is to educate. We don't want us to be like, what is that? I actually had a conversation with a client, and she was just kind of like, frustrated, which I can understand how we get frustrated that there's so much information out there about food and just, and we had this conversation about My Plate and the food pyramid, and it was like that deer in the headlights looked like, Allie, what are you talking about? What is this My Plate thing? And Shawna, I don't know if you would agree with this, but I'm guessing you probably would. What we've seen is that unfortunately, or fortunately, unfortunately, whatever you want to say, Americans as a whole, and I don't know about Canadians, you could maybe speak to that, but over 90% of Americans have never followed these guidelines, whether it's the pyramid, whether it's the My Plate. We just don't eat like this. Is that kind of your experience?
I would say that we're not using the pyramid or the My Plate as necessarily a guideline. Sadly, sometimes people default to crazy diets.
Mm,
we
yeah.
look at we look at a lot of the big fads. There was the low fat, then there's the keto, then there was the
Hmm.
carnivore, there's all these iterations of diets that are not necessarily, well, they're definitely not following the MyPlate or even the pyramid, because
Hmm.
what I can say about all iterations of the guideline is that whether you agree with the balance or not, all macros are represented. And I think this is an
Hmm.
important point that we want to bring up. And I think we didn't preface this, Allie, but I think it's important to note that we don't want to be bashing any, we don't want to be politicizing this at all. We just want to talk about this from a nutritional standpoint. And like I said, whether you agree with the portion sizes on any of the iterations of the guidelines, the one thing that all have is carbs, fats, protein. And in order to get carbs, fats, and proteins, you need to be including pretty much all food groups
Yes.
in some combination, whether you choose
Hmm.
to use to take eat dairy or not, whether you choose to have protein from plant-based or meat-based sources, you need to have that protein and you need to understand how to get that protein in a certain quantity. So I think that's important to note that we're not politicizing this. Uh, and we really do want to speak on how the macros are important, but not necessarily the specific amounts of it. We're not going to kind of get to that granular level.
Yes, 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 definitely. And because food does not care about politics in the United States, and China's in another
Nowhere.
country, so and nowhere.
No.
So food doesn't carbs, fats, and proteins don't care about all that, and our waistlines don't care about all that. And so that is what most ladies are like wanting to know. And when they're coming to me and this gal, and I know I'm scrolling around, y'all have to excuse me with the screen share. Um, so when gals come to me, they're just wanting to know how can I get this belly fat off? Or when they come to Shawna, that's what we're wanting to know. And one of the things that the lady that I was showing this to and showed her my plate, her frustration was that she felt like that she was not getting any guidance on from like these kind of guidelines. Now she did not know my plate existed, and one of the things that I showed her is all of these, if we were to follow these, we would all have so much, and on a whole, as a society, we would have so much lower chronic disease, no matter which iteration of these. And I don't, this particular slide that I'm showing right now does not have the newest one, but just pretend that the new inverted one is on here as well. If we were to follow any of these, we would be much healthier as Americans. These are not meant to be a personal diet plan or food plan, though. That's not the purpose of these guidelines. And I'm going to kind of go through the older version again, just to give some history. This is, let's see, this is the 20 to 25 guidelines that I'm pulling up now because I want people, if you're looking, you're going to see, and I'm just going to scroll, do a kind of a quick scroll just to show you how long this document is. There's like table of contents. There's list of different tables that show you about different types of eating, whether it be the Mediterranean diet, vegetarian diet, all these different things, different tables that show weight gain recommendations for pregnancy. I mean, there's just so much is covered in this document. And this document was not written for the general public. And then there's a page, and this is also in the newest guidelines too, although the language is different, but both of them have a page that's a message from the secretaries. And so the secretaries are appointed. This particular one I'm looking at was when Sonny Perdue was U.S. Secretary, the Secretary of U.S. Department of Agriculture, and Alex Azar was U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Secretary. So they have a message at the beginning that just kind of gives like a here's what we're doing, here's this edition. It's ground. This one says it's grounded in science and reviews of current bodies of evidence and key nutrition and health topics for each life stage. So they do talk about children, they talk about pregnant women, and different ages and stages. They talk about macronutrients, which Shawna mentioned, and macronutrients are simply proteins, carbs, and fats. And so when you hear us say macronutrients, that is what we're talking about and how those play into our eating. And then as you go down, they're just saying thank you for all you do to help Americans make strides toward aligning closer to the dietary guidelines as we all work together to help the public lead healthier lives. So that though these guidelines were not written for the general public, and I'm going to keep scrolling so you can see how long they are. There's acknowledgments of who all was involved, so you can see these people registered dietitians, PhDs, who these people were at this particular time. And then there's like a summary. You get into the guidelines about what's what. And then we just, I mean, it goes on and on. I'm going to tell you, this is a long document. So this thing is about 150 pages, Shauna. But again, it was not written for the general public. And as we look at the new guidelines, we're going to see changes to that. So I'm just going to keep scrolling so people can just get an idea of why. I mean, Shauna, you deal with the general public, you're dealing with ladies. Do you think this is written for, who do you think this is written for?
Well, I do feel you would need an educated eye to discern this information to apply it to what should I have on my plate. There's a
Hmm.
lot of great information in here, but it's not necessarily user friendly for Mrs. Smith or Mrs. Jones, which is why the general public falls for slick marketing in, hey, let me give you this done for you meal plan of, Bob's best diet. So it makes it
Yeah.
easy for us to fall prey to those fad diets. So there is a lot of great information in there, though.
Yeah, as you see, I'm just going through. There's a lot of great information, but first of all, who's going to take the time
I'm to
to
read it.
read this long document? Well, there are people that take the time, but they're not the general public.
Yeah,
So
it's
this
not,
is
it's,
written for
yeah,
professionals. This
yeah,
document is really meant to be a guide for professionals that are then taking this document, and if they're working with children, they're taking the information related to children. If they're working with pregnant women, they're taking the information related to pregnant women, and they are using this as, and then they will create other educational tools that
yeah,
go along with these things. For like when you were a teacher, I'm sure there were lots of tools that and you were a teacher probably before we had all the tools that we have now, Shauna.
yeah. But hospitals and registered dietitians that work in hospitals would use this kind of document to then create meal plans and food choices in hospital settings, that kind of thing, correct?
And you see, yes, 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 for schools, for yes,
Lunch
hospitals, any kind
programs.
of institutionalized
Yeah,
type government funded
yeah,
type nutrition programming, senior meals, um, the meals that are for like lower income or like SNAP type benefits, and those are the ways. So this is not meant to be a guideline for the average client that we're meeting with to go and read this and then disseminate this and then to say here's what I'm supposed to eat, which is why most people don't even know that these documents exist until you're seeing me scrolling. I'm still scrolling, y'all, and I'm
yeah.
steady scrolling.
You're only on chapter 5. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm on lactating women right now, so
Yeah. This
and
is this is
yeah,
crazy long
yeah,
and
it is crazy
comprehensive.
long.
But yes,
Older adults. Now I'm to older adults.
the average person cannot read this.
Physical activity. Yeah, the average person is not going to be reading
All
this.
these
Now, they might look
tables.
at that picture of the pyramid that we had or the MyPlate. And so, okay, so I'm going to go down to the last page so we can see. Okay, there we go. It was, let's see, 149 pages is what we've got here. So that took a minute to scroll
Yeah.
through that. And then with that came this MyPlate. Let me see if I can get to the guidelines for MyPlate. Um, I think it was with this older one. Yeah, I've just got a
Yeah.
short picture. So
It's
the
not
MyPlate,
there.
I've got it pulled up now, and it shows that fruit, like it gives you a picture of a plate. That's why it's called my plate because most of us eat on a plate. It's got a little fork on one side. It's got a little thing of dairy on the top right, like you would be eating or drinking a little dairy. And then it's got the plate divided into four sections. There's a section for fruits. There's a section for vegetables, which is the largest section. There's a section for grains, which is probably next. And then protein and fruit are about the same size on this picture if you're just looking at the imagery. And that was the 2011 and 2020 MyPlate. So they're recommending you eat real food. They're recommending you eat fruits, vegetables, protein, grains. And these are all things that grow from the ground. There's not a category for Reese's cups. There's not a category for cake. There's not a category for like sodas. None of that is in any of the food guide pyramids in any of the iterations.
Yeah.
All right, so let's now flip over to just so we can compare what we have now with the new. And this is so if you're with us on YouTube, you can look at this. This is the new pyramid that was just released and the new dietary guidelines. And one of the things that we're going to see, and right now I'm coming at this from an educational policy, just like here's the differences. And again, so here's what I see. We have the picture, that's the first page, and then it goes immediately to the message from the secretaries. And then that is signed from Robert F. Kennedy Jr., from the Department of Health and Human Services, and Brooke Rollins from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Now, the tone and like when I read this, it is different. So that other one was speaking to professionals, like help us work together to help the public. Let's look at how this one reads. The message is simple. Eat real food. Like that's the very first line on here. These guidelines, it says that these guidelines mark the most significant reset of federal nutrition policy in our nation's history. Then it says to make America healthy again, we must return to the basics. American households must prioritize diets built on whole, nutrient dense foods, protein, dairy, vegetables, fruits, and healthy fats. So it does not mention, well, and sorry, and whole grains. So same exact categories, even though this is the biggest change. The categories, like we said, they're still the same. Protein, dairy, vegetables, and fruits and grains all fall under what category of macronutrient, Shauna? Not that I'm testing you, but for our
Oh,
people.
the carbohydrate category.
Yes, and a lot of people don't. This is another thing that I find over and over, Shauna, is that many clients do not understand, especially in that old food guide pyramid. You know, they had grains, and yeah, that was a weird visual, and having that such a big portion. But many people don't realize that and carbs get such a bad rap, but vegetables and fruits and fiber, those are
Yeah.
carbohydrates,
Yeah.
right, Shauna? Am I
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that is you hit the nail on the head when you say that carbohydrates get a bad rap, in that people don't understand that we need fiber. And
Hmm.
if you're not eating carbs, you are not getting fiber. And that vegetables are actually a carbohydrate. And so
Yep.
when we think of carbs, it's not just muffins and breads and potatoes and rice and pasta. It's
Yep.
broccoli and kale and
Yeah.
celery and eggplant and all the things.
Yes, absolutely. And so I'm going to read this again. To make America healthy again, we must return to the basics. American households must prioritize diets built on whole, nutrient-dense foods, protein, dairy, vegetables, fruits, healthy fats, and whole grains. Does that sound familiar, Shauna?
Yeah, and when you dive into it, it's very much the same. And
Yes, it is. When I
there's
read
not
this, I was like, wait a minute.
what's the
Am I
difference?
being punked here? Wait a minute.
There is a different visual, and I
There
think
is
the
a different
visual
visual.
can
Yeah,
be
and
a
we'll
bit
get to that in a
confusing.
second, but but this is their letter, their message to Americans of and this is a message to Americans. This is different because the old guidelines, it was clearly not written to the average American. It was written to which again, most people wouldn't know what it says because we did not read 150
Yeah.
pages, much less even the letter at the message at the beginning, right? Because that was
Yeah.
just a lot for the average person to read. So a
Yeah.
lot of people may think that all this is brand new. So it says paired with a dramatic reduction in highly processed foods laden with refined carbohydrates, added sugars, excess sodium, unhealthy fats, and chemical additives. This approach can change the health trajectory for so many Americans. Again, does this sound familiar? If we read into
Yes.
those old guidelines, if you really dove in and read them, you're going to read the
Yeah.
same information. Yeah.
I think the difference is, to my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, that they are highlighting that we are trying to reduce the processed foods, whereas it was more implied before because there was like on the old pyramid, there was maybe it was a sliver or the very top of the pyramid where it was like cakes and sugars. It was
Mm-hmm.
referenced, but it wasn't really highlighted that, hey, we really need to reduce these. So I think that
Mm-hmm.
is maybe
Well, if
pronounced.
you read the guidelines, though, they talk a lot about reducing
Oh,
refined sugars, and this is a guide. This is the guidelines. We're not looking at the
that's true.
actual. We're not
That's
looking at
true.
the graphics. I'm looking at
That's true.
guidelines versus
Yeah.
guidelines because, and see how easily this can get all.
Yeah.
It's easy to get like this is guidelines versus guidelines. If we're looking at, and then if you want to go back and you don't even have to read 150, just kind of
Yeah.
scan
Yeah.
those, and we'll
True.
put those in the show notes so that people have an easy reference to go and just look at what are the similarities for yourself, what are the differences. It won't take you long. I will say this is one of the great things about the new guidelines is it does not take long to read them, and it kind of is a synopsis of a lot of the stuff in the old longer
From the old
guidelines.
ones.
And so
Yeah.
this is something that Americans can read, and so this might have a different impact um, on Americans, and a lot of Americans don't know that the pyramid was replaced by MyPlate. They think we're going from one pyramid to another pyramid, which
Yeah.
is not the case. And we want
Yeah.
our Girls Talk Healthy Aging listeners to be educated about this and just know so that y'all do know that there was this whole MyPlate thing that was there for many years, like 14 plus years in between. So if I keep going, it says, the let's see, many of the illnesses are not genetic destiny. They are predictable result of the standard American diet, a diet which over time has become reliant on highly processed foods and coupled with a sedentary lifestyle. Again, if you go to the original, I mean, none of this is nothing earth-shadowing yet. As far as for us as professionals, I mean, I can't speak for you, Shawna, but of what I've read and been taught and learned.
Agreed. I do feel like the start of it is more user friendly to general population.
That is the big thing one of the big things I wanted to point out is that this document is written more to actual Americans, not to professionals. Um, so that may change Americans getting the message, maybe. I don't know. That's something that these are some things to left to be seen. Let's see. For decades, federal incentives have promoted low quality, high processed foods and pharmaceutical intervention instead of prevention. And I definitely, as someone who works in the prevention world, would love to see more input or more influence, more highlights to more and more lifestyle prevention. So I'm definitely um, all about that and seeing that happen. These things were again put in the other guidelines, but again, they're hidden in 149 pages of information, and they were not written to the general population. Okay, then we get to the changes today. We are realigning our food system to support American farmers, ranchers, and companies who grow and produce real food, and the Trump administration is working to ensure all families can afford it. So, and when we get down to the guidelines, you have to think that the cattle farmers are going to be pretty feel like they're winning in the new guidelines and the new pyramid, inverted pyramid. The dairy industry has to feel pretty good. Now the wheat and grain producers might be a little bit. I think they've got a little mixed reaction right now. They're trying to they've got to figure out how to kind of spin it to their way because one of the reasons that we have had so much of an emphasis on grains is because that in our capitalist society, companies want to make profits. and grains that we are able in the US to produce those cheaply, and then we can turn them more cheaply into high fructose corn syrup than we can trying to grow cane sugar, like maybe other countries might be able to do. And I don't know about the different crops in Canada, but we are really good at growing wheat and grain here in America. And
Yeah.
so we've used that in our food supply heavily, for better or for worse. That's what we've done. Let's see, we're putting real food back at the center of the American diet now. Grain and wheat, those are real foods. So just to be clear, real food that nourishes the body, real food that restores health, real food that fuels energy and encourages movement and exercise, real food that builds strength. All right, so I'm going to kind of scroll now, and you're going to see how quickly I scroll through these pages. So that was just the little secretary, just kind of the little message from the secretary. So, and you see that these are, if you're looking at this screen, you see that it's got little titles. It's big print. It's got a big headline: "Eat the right amount for you." Prioritize protein foods at every meal, consume dairy, gut health. Again, this is written. Shawna, do you see the difference in who this is written to?
Yeah, absolutely. It is much more user friendly.
Yes. Incorporate healthy fats, focus on whole grains, limit highly processed foods, added sugars, and refined carbohydrates. And it talks about limiting foods and vegetables. It even gets foods and beverages that include artificial flavors, dyes, artificial preservatives, and low calorie, non nutritive sweeteners. And it also says avoid sugar sweetened beverages such as sodas, fruit drinks, and energy drinks. So, and then I'm already almost to the end. Limit alcohol. It talks about sodium guidelines. It does have a section for special populations, infancy and early childhood, birth to 4 years. And it encourages breastfeeding as long as mutually desirable. And again, if you go back to some of the old guidelines, you're going to see some of this similar information. It's just not going to be written in such an easy to read format. And then we've got toddlers, infants and toddlers. We've got middle childhood. And then we go to adolescents, young adults, pregnant women, lactating women. Look at how small, how
Yeah.
little
There
that
was
takes up.
pages.
It
There
was
was
pages in the other
pages.
document, and now it's just
Yeah.
a little blurb. And older adults, a
Yeah.
little blurb.
Yeah.
So, and with older adults, it does talk about needing fewer calories, but still requiring equal. Interesting. Some older adults, it says need fewer calories, but still require equal or greater amounts of key nutrients, protein, vitamin B12, vitamin D, and calcium. They should prioritize nutrient-dense foods, and interestingly, it lists dairy as the first, meats as the second, and we'll get into that in a minute. Seafood, eggs, legumes, and whole plant vegetables and grain. Those are kind of the last thing that it mentions here, which is
Doesn't
interesting.
even mention grains.
It says whole grains. It says vegetables.
Oh,
It
yes,
says,
at the end,
yeah,
full plant
but that's
food.
it's the last thing.
Last thing.
Vegetables and fruits and whole grains, nuts and seeds are the last
Last
thing
thing.
mentioned.
Yeah.
So that is where we start to get into, okay, what's really different here?
Yeah.
And then it's got individuals with chronic disease. It's got a vegetarians and vegan section. And then look,
That's it.
that's it. We're at the
9
end.
pages, not even
Nine
full
pages.
pages. 140
Nine.
less pages.
Yes. Yes. So I thought that that would be fun to share because I don't think that most people are going to, look at that and just be knowledgeable about what we got different. And now I've got the picture that we have now. And so, Shauna, I'm going to let you kind of, I don't know if you want to just any kind of takeaways you see from this picture.
Well, one thing that I find interesting is that it talks about, having the prioritizing protein, and beef and dairy is right up there at the top. And I'm a beef and dairy eater. I think they're awesome forms of protein. But I think that the fat guideline is the same at 10%. And so,
Aren't you smart, Shauna? And most people would not, but Shauna's a professional. You are correct, Shauna.
well, and that's the thing is, how am I going to be eating the foods that they're prioritizing, but still be within my dietary guideline for fat without, because cardiovascular disease is real, and high fat, saturated fat can be a real risk factor towards cardiovascular disease. So there may be some confusion there. That's the
Yeah.
thing that jumps
Well,
out.
and that's the thing that most professionals that are looking at this, that work in nutrition, those of us that do have nutrition knowledge, and we do know that the guideline is still 10%. So we're saying that we should get our fats, that should be 10% of our diet, but yet they're at the top of the pyramid. And Shawna and I know macronutrients and calorie density enough to understand that fats have 11 calories per gram. So a little goes a long way as far as adding up into your total calories for the day. Whereas a carbohydrate like fruits or vegetables only have 4 calories per day. So if I'm supposed to only get 10% of my calories from these fats, but yet they have 11 calories for every
It's
gram. That's
it's
going to be
nine.
it's the math isn't math, and is what a lot of us in the on the professional side are just like questioning and asking how. And so there may be some updates and some things that that might be. I think that that's one of the things that you're probably gonna see. My
Yeah.
guess, and this is Allie's guess.
Yeah.
My guess is that enough professionals will be asking that question that they will feel the need at some point to
Yeah.
address that and maybe clarify that for
And I just
us.
want to, I think you misspoke, Kelly, is fat is 9 calories per gram.
I'm sorry,
Protein,
nine.
nine. Yeah.
Yeah, yep, yep,
Protein and fat, protein and carbs. And like you said, carbs, whether it's a piece of whole grain bread, whether it's a donut, even though a donut is fat and carbs, the
yep.
carbohydrate in that donut is still 4 calories per gram, and all fat is 9 calories per gram.
Program. Yep.
And
Thank you,
then,
Sean. Yeah.
yeah, I know that it just popped out.
Yeah.
And
No,
then,
I add two things sometimes when I'm talking to clients and it comes up to nine. So anyway, that was
yeah, yeah,
but
yeah,
it is nine. So
yeah.
nine and
Still
protein has
over
around
double.
four.
Yeah,
Yeah,
over
so
double.
fat is over double the calories for every gram of fat you eat. So it's going to be hard to fit in that 10%. Say that this is, and it's hard to understand how this is at the top of this pyramid and the biggest section, but yet it's only supposed to make up 10%. So that's just one of those things I think we're going to have to get some more there's some
Or,
questions will have to be answered and some explanations given as to how that's going to work in reality and
yeah,
practice when people start like because these guidelines when we talk about they're not our personal diet plans
that's
and
what I was
guidelines
just going to say.
typically, but
Yeah,
these are going to be like okay when this goes down to this the folks that are deciding how to separate out school lunches and they're getting these two contradictory guidelines, how are they going to reconcile that?
balance.
So
Yeah,
that's there's going to have to be some, some updates. So we will stay tuned and let y'all know as changes are made. One of the things, if we're, so right now we're looking at the new inverted pyramid. That's the picture that I have up, and this is also interesting. In the actual written guidelines that I read, the fruits and the vegetables and the grains were listed last. But if you look at the visual,
hmm,
vegetables and fruits are right up there with the protein and dairy, and they look equal. Like
yeah.
fruits, it's like protein, dairy, and healthy fats on the left, vegetables and fruits on the right. Is that what you're seeing?
Yes, and the whole grains at the
At the
bottom.
bottom. Hmm.
And then kind of, it looks like the fats are kind of in the middle,
Yeah,
because it looks like olive oil and avocado, and then butter is
butter.
below that. And then
Hmm.
there's nuts, which are
Nuts.
also a great source of fat. So
Yep.
I do feel like the graphic is a little bit confusing. I do like the emphasis on whole food. I like the emphasis on the fact that eliminating an entire food group is not your healthiest option. But as
Hmm.
you said, the food guide is not necessarily prescriptive in terms of quantities of each food group.
Right. Right. And so then it's like, what do we do with this information as I could go on and talk about all this fun. There's so much to talk about here, and maybe we can, do a follow up at some point. But like For our clients, I mean, one of the things I wanted to do is just educate them about here's what we did have the last guidelines and the MyPlate, and this MyPlate existed, and educate people on here's what we have now, and here are the differences that we see. And we don't know how this is going to play out into like because these things, even though this document is written to Americans, the funding behind this document goes to professionals implementing programs that use these guidelines. And so we don't know yet how that is going to look. And so I would say, in some ways, for most of the listeners that are just worrying about their own, like, how do I get rid of my belly fat? I don't want to say that, like, from a policy standpoint, this is probably not going to affect them in their everyday
Yeah.
life to a
Yeah.
huge extent.
And
Now,
I do think the visual of the plate, because that's also Canada's guideline is a visual of a plate. That
mhm,
might be a bit more realistic or helpful in terms of how do I fill my plate? Because as you said, Allie, there's really not much change between the two policies or the two pyramids.
guidelines.
Sorry, the guidelines exactly. Uh, but this might be a more helpful visual with the emphasis on whole food and not the processed food. So if half your plate is fruit and veggies with a little bit more veggies, a quarter of your plate is protein and maybe a quarter of is grains with a little bit of dairy, you're probably in a good that's probably a good start.
And I would say again, just to reiterate what we said earlier, if Americans followed any, and I've just pulled back up, I pulled up the MyPlate picture, now I pulled up the new inverted pyramid. If Americans followed any of these, they all have real food on them. That's one thing they all
Yeah.
have in common. And
Yeah.
the challenge with us on, and so these things are to look at public policy, and my master's is in public administration, where we look at things are on a larger scale. It's not like I have Sally sitting in front of me saying, Allie, help me lose my belly fat, or help me get my arms tighter, or help me lose 20 pounds. This, the programs and the things that these things are meant to direct policy on are related to funding for programs that are hopefully, the hope is that they're designed to decrease more chronic disease. Now we know those numbers have gone up and up over time, but that is the goal of these top guidelines are to reduce chronic illness. And we
In
know
the
that
larger population.
yeah, and we know that people that have wealth really is health because that's one of the dividing factors when we look at in the rates of chronic illness and the rates of negative outcomes from chronic illness. The less you have on the income scale side, the higher the rate of chronic illness and problems from chronic illness. And so, yeah, that's really the who this was designed to. So it's interesting to me, and I think that that in and of itself shows a shift that the guidelines were not written to professionals, that the guidelines are written to Americans. So that is also an interesting shift. And we don't know yet, are these going to still be used to drive policy? Are these going to be used to one of the things I'll say that this administration is very good at doing, and that is getting attention and getting people's eyes and ears on something. And so the My Plate didn't get eyes and ears. This is getting eyes and ears. And maybe because we just took a pyramid and we like inverted it and made it look like we just turned it upside down and changed everything. But when you really delve into the guidelines, you see that there's so much more that is the same than different.
Yeah.
But maybe I don't know if that might change the way that this document is used. So that again, there's a lot of left to be seen. And I'm going to
Yeah.
take us off of screen share if that's okay, if I can figure
Yeah.
that out. Let me see.
I think you're doing it.
Yeah, I'm getting there. Y'all bear with me. I have to make this bigger to do it. Stop share. All right. So hopefully we're stopped. Are we back?
Okay.
We're
Yeah.
back. So yeah, so that's a little kind of girls talk, healthy, educational about what's there, what's not there, and
And
what's
and
different and what's not different.
and I think it's we live in a world that is so polarized politically right now. And so we are basically trying to remove that aspect. Doesn't matter what you think about current administration. And I mean, I'm a Canadian. Canadians have our own opinions that don't need to be included in this discussion. It's just we're looking at what's different. And not a ton is different. The
All right.
presentation is different. Maybe the emphasis is different. Maybe there's confusion, but in a different way, because the first pyramid and MyPlate, there was confusion
Yep.
because
Every time there's confusion.
there's
Yeah.
confusion.
And that's one thing that I know that I see with clients, and that's frustrating because, and I mean, we've even had guests on this show, Shawna, that we have had to edit out that were nutrition professionals, that we've had to
Yeah.
edit out things that they said because they were giving wrong information as nutrition professionals. So I get it. Like it's so
It's,
hard. It's so hard. And that's why I wanted to do this. So we can just, I'm just showing you, I'm showing you the exact documents and you can see for yourselves. Now, there is more emphasis on protein and there is more emphasis on saturated fat. And that's really the things I think that's getting a lot of press right
yeah,
now. I don't
yeah,
know, that's so, and I know that that's something that we emphasize with our clients is we're always working to get ladies to get more protein. But that's
yeah,
because, here's the thing, and I'll say this about saturated fats as far as Americans. I can't speak to Canadians, but Americans are not deficient in saturated fats. So, that's one of the things I worry that an unintended consequence of that being the thing that people are latching on to here and that's getting a lot of press is that we're going to think, oh, I just need to eat more butter and lard and that's going to
yeah.
work for me. And Americans, again, I can't speak to
Don't do that.
Canadians or people in
Yeah.
other, but we are not deficient in saturated fat, y'all.
Yes.
We are
Yes.
getting plenty of saturated fat. Now, the thing I would say that we are deficient in is getting real food.
Yeah. Real food and probably fiber
Yeah,
because
and
I
that does
think,
not come from protein, y'all.
yeah,
Fiber. You have to eat vegetables and fruits to get and grains to get fiber. And that
yeah,
becomes more important for our audience because as we're aging, Shauna,
yeah.
you're a good spokesperson on fiber. Tell us why. Why do we need it?
Well, we need it for proper elimination to keep ourselves
So
regular.
we can poop, y'all. That's
Yes.
what she means by proper elimination. I like how you put that.
Yes. And it helps with gut health. It helps with satiety. And so many of our ladies that we speak with, their issue is I'm hungry all the time, or I'm not happy with my body composition. And so to change body composition, an easy fix is say, be more full. How can you be more full without eating more calories? Well, you eat calories that are more filling, which enter fiber. Fiber keeps you fuller longer. Protein, the same thing. And so, protein, I must say, is winning right now in terms of you
It's
see
getting a lot of
protein
press.
everywhere,
Yep.
which is a mixed bag because not all the protein
Mm-hmm.
offerings out there are as quality as you would like because we're taking a whole food and now we're making it a drink. Now we're making it a bar. Now we're making it a powder. I'm waiting for the protein wine. I saw a meme about that. Once
I have seen the protein wine stuff. Yes, I have seen that.
and
It
so
is having its moments.
yes, it's protein is having its moment and fiber is really kind of getting lost in the mix. And
Something
especially
always does get lost because we hone in on one thing instead
at a
of getting
time.
all the
Yeah.
things.
And fiber, like with the highly processed foods that are on the shelves, especially the convenience foods, they tend to be lower in fiber. So, maybe fiber is going to have its moment coming up, and we just need to be patient. But, the Girls Talk Healthy Aging listeners, we need to be cutting edge. We need to be eating fiber before fiber's cool.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. And not just focusing on one thing or one
Yes.
macronutrient. One of the things that a lot of people, and I'm going to say this again because I think that one of the things I've realized is I think because me and Shawna speak to this stuff and we do this so much with nutrition, we maybe don't repeat some things that need to be said enough. And y'all, fiber, a lot of people do not realize that carbs, carbohydrates give you fiber. So if you're cutting out carbs, if you're eating a diet that does not have carbs, then you are cutting out fiber. And
Yeah.
that means you're cutting out fruit and vegetables. Now,
Yeah.
vegetables are lower in carbs, so you could be getting your fiber from vegetables. That is a possibility. But it really, even though these guidelines speak to Americans, I think that unfortunately, my fear is that unfortunately, you still get the influencers that get a hold of this stuff, and you still got, we're still not getting sound advice, is my fear moving forward. Because people look at this and think that they have it all, like, it's easy now. It's, a 9-page document. So it is easier to grab this but maybe not, maybe it's easier for people to read it for themselves and to, get the gist of we need to eat real food and we're going to have better outcomes. Now, red meat, if my dad had a heart attack a couple of years ago, he probably needs to talk to his cardiologist before he goes like, well, RFK Jr. said I need to go eat a bunch of red meat. Well, your cardiologist might disagree. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
be careful. These things, these guidelines can't be speaking to Shauna or to Allie. And so
Yes.
we have to recognize that as well.
We have to be discerning. We have to think for ourselves. We have to look at our own health outcomes and needs. And as we age, we do have, even the latest document says, as we age, we have maybe a higher need for protein, vitamin B, calcium. I would add fiber to that. And so
Hmm.
when you were talking about carbs or fiber, I do want to point out that we need more things like fruits and vegetables and maybe some whole grains, but we're not going to
Not
necessarily,
Lucky Charms. We're not getting our
yes,
fiber from Lucky Charms, y'all.
or
That's not the
donut.
kind of carb that we're talking
Exactly.
about. But
Yes.
unfortunately, people think it's either or, either Lucky Charms or carbs, and fruit is something else, and not realizing no, they're actually both carbs. One's just got one is
More
much more
nutrient
nutrient
dense.
dense, which means it has more nutrients in it and fiber in it, whereas Lucky Charms does not. So you're getting calories either way. On the fruit side, you're getting calories that give you other things, vitamins and
Yeah.
nutrients and
Yeah. And
fiber
fiber.
and
Yes.
hydration that you're not getting from Lucky Charms. So,
And, some people might be discouraged to think that our parents and grandparents, they knew a lot more about nutrition without without having social media. And what did our parents say? Eat vegetables, eat your protein
mhm.
first, dessert is a treat, not for every day. I mean, these are the general messages, although we also had to clean your plate, which is probably not always helpful. But common sense sadly is not so common. But when you're going into a grocery store and you look at what's on the outside, all the kind of perishable foods, those are where you should be shopping. All the middle aisles, those are the sometime foods. Those are the foods that are more highly processed. There's nothing wrong with them. But if we can be eating a lot of food from the outside of the grocery store, which is perishable, fresh, and whole food, we're going to be better off.
And there is something, depending on the person, there can be something wrong with it if you're gluten intolerant, if you're diabetic, and that stuff is spiking your blood sugar because you're eating all this processed stuff. Again, yeah,
Yeah. But
we're all,
everything in moderation. And I think that
yep.
we can agree with all of the food guidelines when we see that it has proteins, carbs, fats from a variety of all, all foods.
Yeah.
Alli, if you had a wish for our listeners today, what would it be?
Wow. Eat real food.
Again, you steal my wish. My wish, well, but real food could be the Lucky Charms. So my
Yeah.
my wish is I will bounce
Food
off
from the
yours
ground or
is
yeah.
is to try and use your common sense to eat those foods that in your heart are more like, let's not kid ourselves. Even though Lucky Charms might have whole grain on
Yeah.
the
On the
label,
label,
we
on the
know
box.
that there's better choices. So use the common sense knowledge that you do have. Try not to overcomplicate it and eat a variety of foods. And there's no shame in getting some help and some direction.
Absolutely. Get some help and direction from a professional that does understand macronutrients, protein, carbs, and fats, and that does understand women's bodies. And yeah, keep it simple and break. Okay.
I don't think we need to do an intro.
Okay. That's fine. Yeah, I think we kind of did.
Yeah. So I'm going to just stop the recording. It was good.
Okay. Was that okay?
It was great.